This video is brought to you by Manscaped.com. Keep yourself well groomed with the Performance Package Kit from Manscaped. More about them in a bit. All mythical or semi-mythical creatures in British lore have a place they can call home. Nessie can splash around in her loch. King Arthur wines and dines in Camelot. Peter Pan chills out forever in Neverland. And Robin Hood, of course, can always rest under the windswept foliage of Sherwood Forest, Nottinghamshire. In today's Geographics, we will explore this legendary location and examine what is real and what is not about the story of Robin Hood. But along the way, we will find out about many sites of interest that the forest encloses. The area that would later be known as Sherwood Forest has been sparsely inhabited since prehistoric times, as evidence of flint tools show that hunter-gatherers roamed the area. Some of this evidence can be found in the Creswell Crags, a 20-minute drive or 3-hour walk from the main Sherwood Visitor Centre near Edwinstowe. The crags are a limestone gorge dotted with caves and dozens of smaller fissures, which have gifted archaeologists with plenty of surprises. One of the most notable caves is Church Hole, which contains the oldest verified cave art in the UK. These prehistoric carvings include images of bison, reindeer, birds, as well as highly stylized female characters and even sexual organs, which may have carried some sort of religious meaning. An analysis carried out with a method called Uranium-series Disequilibrium dating has revealed that the oldest motif was carved more than 12,800 years ago. Church Hole may have been more than just an early art gallery or place of worship. It appears that it was also regularly inhabited. Archaeologists have found quartzite, antler bone, and flint tools used by Neanderthals before the last ice age. Evidence of Neanderthal presence can be found also in the so-called Robin Hood Cave, or Robin Hood's Hall, a series of 4 interlinked chambers. Legend has it that the outlaw in tights used this hideout in between heists, but it is probably just clever branding. What is certain is that the cave was called home by early groups of Neanderthals. Our prehistoric competitors occupied the cave until around 40,000 years ago, leaving behind a variety of tools, including hand axes. From 22,000 years ago onward, Homo sapiens took over, as attested by the presence of an intricate piece of art, the image of a horse's head engraved on a horse rib. In October 2018, members of the society Subterranea Britannica made another discovery inside Robin's cave, one that may send shivers down the back of an old skeptic like myself, but well, we're going to get to that a little bit later. For now, let's stick to more straightforward archaeological findings. During the late Iron Age and the Roman period, human habitation and farming became more and more common. By the 9th century AD, several farming communities and villages were well established in the Sherwood landscape. Some of these settlements betray a Viking origin in their name. Typically, names ending in by, like Thoresby, are Scandinavian in origin, while those ending in Thorpe are Danish. An area with a distinctive Old Scandinavian name is Birklands Forest, just northeast of Mansfield. The toponym may indicate a sacred grove within a birchwood, suggesting an area of great importance. In 2005, local historians Lynda, Mallett, and Stuart Reddish made a discovery in the Birklands Forest which confirms its relevance for inhabitants of the area during the Viking Age. The husband and wife team located an artificial mound mentioned in records since the 14th century but never located. This is Thynghowe, a name derived from the Old Scandinavian words for assembly and mound. Open-air assembly places, usually on elevated locations, were a fundamental institution through which early medieval societies settled disputes and passed laws. Thynghowe is located on a relatively high ridge, delimiting 2 valleys. It is likely that Thynghowe not only divided the valleys, but was also a part of a boundary between 2 or more estates. In other words, it would have formed a sort of no man's land, which made it possible to settle arguments in a more impartial fashion. The purpose of the artificial mound may have been to provide a stage for judges, witnesses, or other public speakers. In another interpretation, this higher ground may have been a seating area reserved for VIP representatives at the assembly. In the 10th century, more precisely in 958 AD, the wooded area was first recorded as Skerjuda or Sherwood. This may mean woodland belonging to the shire or district, implying that inhabitants of the district had common rights to pasture and other resources in the area. This rather democratic state of affairs wasn't going to last very long. On October 14th, 1066, William the Conqueror defeated King Harold at the Battle of Hastings, marking the beginning of the Norman occupation. Under the new rule, Sherwood officially became a forest. Now, you might think that the term wood and forest mean the same thing, so, well, what's the big deal? Well, it turns out that a forest, in medieval terms, was a legal designation. It identified an area subject to royal laws protecting the valuable resources of Vert and Venison, or timber and game to commoners like you and me. So it was that Sherwood became a royal grounds wherein only the royal families and their retinue could hunt and cut down trees. The law in the forest was strictly enforced by wardens and rangers employed by a crown-appointed official. This official's job was to collect all rents, taxes and revenues on behalf of the king, to administer justice and to generally keep the public peace. These officials were called sheriffs, and the local one was based in Nottingham. So maybe this is starting to ring some bells. By the 13th century, Sherwood Forest covered about 100,000 acres, 1/5 of the entire county of Nottinghamshire. Now, Robin Hood lore may have planted in our minds the image of Sherwood as a continuous expanse of dense and untamed woodlands. And sure, the forest did include large birch and oak groves, but they were interspersed with areas of sandy heath and grasslands. The medieval royal forests, which covered 1/4 of all English lands, were by no means wild. As such, Sherwood and other similar areas would have been considered productive resources, which were carefully managed by the crown and its emissaries. For example, royal foresters would use techniques such as coppicing and pollarding to stimulate the growth of trees and produce timber for construction, or they collected twigs and brush from the underwood to be used as domestic fuels. The forest also produced an autumn crop of acorns destined to fatten pigs. Meanwhile, cattle and sheep were allowed to graze freely under the trees. But the main concern of the crown was to protect the population of deer. We wouldn't want there to be a shortage of deer. Nobody could touch these magnificent animals, except for the king and his friends, of course, who were free to stab, pierce, skewer, skin, and roast them as much as they liked. As a corollary to this, the king instituted the office of the Eyre for Forest Pleas. This was a role centered around supervising and protecting the deer's natural habitat. In other words, the English crown had unwittingly started a nature conservation movement some 8 centuries ago. King Henry II, who ruled until 1189, held the deer of Sherwood in such importance that he built a large hunting lodge, almost a palace, near the village of King's Clipstone, just outside of Mansfield. The ruins of the lodge are today known as King John's Palace. Legend has it that King John, Henry's son, spent much of his time hunting prey such as hares, deers, and Robin Hood's merry men. Allegedly, Robin infiltrated the palace. But again, this is another case of crowbarring an existing property into a successful franchise, as the evil king probably only spent about 9 days inside the building. The hunting lodge was in use for at least 2 centuries, but after the death of Richard II in 1400, the site was merely maintained, but never actually visited by the Lancastrian kings. During the Wars of the Roses from 1455 to 1487, the ruling class had other concerns in mind, and the house fell into disrepair. By 1525, it was already described as a ruin. For years, the remains of the lodge were identified as the King's Houses, or the King's Manor, or Manorgarth. The King's John Palace first appeared, without explanation, in 1774 on a map of Nottinghamshire compiled by John Chapman. Backtracking to the royal forests in the 12th and 13th century, these became a source of political tension with both common folk and the nobility. Peasants and small landowners living around the forests would get severe penalties for so much as cutting down a tree or even a branch, let alone killing a deer. On the other hand, landed gentry continuously encroached on forested areas, seeking permission to convert them into arable lands or manage a few acres here or there for themselves. King Henry III eventually yielded to these pressures, issuing the Charters of the Forests in 1217 and 1225, which may be considered an extension of the Magna Carta. The charters curbed the power of the king to claim woodland for the crown and re-established the rights of ordinary people to access the forests. Now, subjects could graze their livestock in Sherwood or obtain wood and water. The king even revoked the harsh punishments for killing his deer. Now, just before we continue with today's video, I do want to say that it's brought to you by Manscaped.com, the premium brand for men's grooming and hygiene products. Manscaped have just released their 4th generation trimmer, the all-new Lawnmower 4.0. They got feedback from all around the world and engineered the next generation of groin and body trimmers by focusing on intelligent functionality. The Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer has these advanced ceramic blades. You can see them under this clipper. Ceramic blades. Right there, they've got skin-safe technology. This helps reduce nicks and cuts and can easily be replaced with a fresh blade so you can groom with confidence. It's also cordless, waterproof, so you can trim in the shower where it's convenient and easy to clean up. And when it comes to charging, the 4.0 isn't just going to die on you every 5 minutes like some other brands. It also has this brand new wireless charging system. There's no little plug at the bottom here. You just pop it in there and it's good to go. So waterproof, wireless charging, sort of like an electric toothbrush. Isn't that neat? Also, from one charge, you get up to 90 minutes of use, so you don't even need to charge it that often. Also, they've got a travel lock feature, so you just click the button 3 times and boom, it locks it. So you're not going to have your bag whenever you're going anywhere. So if you want to start looking good from head to toe with no pair of stones left unturned, join more than 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. Right now you can enter manscaped.com/geographic and get 20% off plus free international shipping. Again, manscaped.com/geographics, or just follow the link in the description below. Your balls will thank you, and let's get back to today's video. Even before the Charters of the Forest, English kings had no problem with granting forest access to a powerful institution. And that was, well, who else but the Catholic Church. In the 12th and 13th centuries, various Christian monastic orders established large estates within the forest on land bestowed to them by the crown. Among the abbeys founded during this period were Rufford, Newstead, and Annesley Hall. Rufford Abbey is located about 2.5 miles to the southeast of Edwinstowe. It was founded in 1146 by Abbot Gemellus and 12 monks of the Cistercian order, known for their austere and Spartan lifestyle. Fueled by such a work ethic, the 13 monks ploughed the land, built a mill, and diverted a river towards it. When Henry VIII broke away from the Church of Rome in 1530, he planned to dissolve Catholic monasteries and seize their assets. In 1536, he appointed 2 men to find sufficient evidence to close down Rufford Abbey. The 2 commissioners delivered. They found that the abbot had cavorted with at least 6 women, 2 of whom were married. The Royal Commission then closed Rufford Abbey and awarded its lands to George Talbot, the 4th Earl of Shrewsbury. Over the centuries, Rufford has developed a reputation as one of the most haunted estates in Great Britain. Paranormal enthusiasts have spotted the ghosts of the abbot of an apparition called the Clammy Boy, and most famously, the Right Lady of Rufford. According to legends, this should be the spirit of Arabella Stuart, niece of Mary, Queen of Scots. Once a pretender to the throne, she was imprisoned in the Tower of London, where she died of starvation in 1615. According to the news website Lincolnshire Live in September 2020, the ghostly figure was captured during a ghost hunt, which was streamed on Facebook Live. Yes, except no. A contender to Rufford's haunted fame is Annesley Hall, 7 miles southwest of Mansfield. The estate was home to the powerful Chaworth Masters family, known for their connections to the Byron family, who lived in nearby Newstead Abbey. The poet Lord Byron was in love with Mary, heiress of Annesley Hall, but his passion would remain a forbidden one thanks to a rather inconvenient family feud. Mary's second cousin had been killed by Byron's own uncle in a duel. The 13th century Annesley Hall sure looks like the perfect setting for tormented love stories and ghastly apparitions, thanks to its ruined church and the marks of a 2015 fire that are still visible today. In 2004, Annesley was the object of a paranormal investigation carried out by the TV show Most Haunted, which apparently found spiritual evidence of several former dwellers, ghost children, infanticidal aristocrats, and a maid who allegedly hung herself. Local guy Dick Starr also witnessed a case of possession. A 19-year-old woman was working with a camera crew at Annesley Hall to capture paranormal activity on camera. As the young lady was possessed by spirits, all filming equipment went dead. According to Starr, the spirits were relaying messages that they didn't want anything to be picked up. All her eyes went up in her head, her tongue went black. Starr recalled how the victim was liberated by applying a Bible and some sage to her body. Starr sounds like an accurate source. He also mentioned how the cellar of Annesley was once invaded by an occult group performing a witchcraft ritual. According to him, the whole of Sherwood Forest has a strong link to witching practices. Which takes us to the discovery of the Creswell Crags, which I mentioned earlier. Speleologists and archaeologists have identified hundreds of so-called witch marks. These are stylized symbols, letters, and acronyms, all carved into the walls and ceilings of Robin Hood's cave. Some of these letters may have religious meaning. For example, the letters VV may stand for Virgin of Virgins and PM may stand for Pace Maria, both references to the Virgin Mary. The dating of such carvings is unknown, though it's most likely from the 16th century. The purpose is even more obscure. According to Alison Fearn from the University of Leicester, the marks may have been left by Christian pilgrims. They may have visited the crags as part of a pilgrimage tradition that's lost to time. John Charlesworth of the Creswell Crags Museum wonders if the marks may be connected to traditional stories about Mother Grundy, a witch said to live in the area. Finally, Professor Ronald Hutton at Bristol University speculates that an exorcism may have taken place in the cave centuries ago. The purpose of the marks, then, was to seal inside the crags whatever unspeakable evil had been banished down there. We With all of this talk of ghosts, witches, and exorcisms, it's easy to forget that inhabitants of Sherwood Forest had to frequently contend with much more real, much more tangible threats. As I mentioned earlier, they risked being chased off, incarcerated, or even physically attacked by foresters, verderers, and the sheriff's men. But the worst risks came from the other side of the law, from the bandits and thieves that infested the woods since Norman times. These outlaws were attracted by the presence of the Great North Way, a road connecting London to York which ran straight through Sherwood. Was one of these outlaws the legendary Robin Hood? Well, kinda. Robin Hood, as depicted in ballads, novels, and films, is clearly a fictional character, and so are his friends and allies. Take, for example, Maid Marion. According to local law, Robin and Marion were married on the doorway of St Mary's Church in Edwinstowe, but the character of Marion never appeared in the early medieval ballad about the outlaw and his master archer. In the original stories, Robin's only devotion was for the Virgin Mary. Looking to update the story with a bit more secularism, post-medieval poets gave him a physical love interest in the form of the fair Marion, whose character was consolidated by Tudor-era playwright Anthony Munday. Munday also first introduced two staples of Robin's legend. He was portrayed as the outlaw and a fallen aristocrat, the Earl of Huntingdon, and he set the action during the reign of Richard the Lionheart, casting King John and the Sheriff of Nottingham as primary antagonists. So, is there any truth in the stories and legends? Well, maybe a bit. Robin Hood appears to be a composite character, combining aspects of both historical moments and specific individuals. A very early version of the character from ballads, such as Robin Hood and the Monk and the Little Guest of Robin Hood, may embody the spirit of rebellion of English subjects against the laws that prevented them from accessing the forest's resources. Victorian folklorists also suggest that Robin was a personification of Anglo-Saxon resistance against Norman rule. As per individuals, there are several candidates to the mantle of real-life Archer of Sherwood. Recent research from Dr. David Crook at the University of Nottingham and the National Archives proposes that the original Robin Hood may have been a Yorkshire outlaw called Robert of Wetherby, active in the Barnsdale Forest. Wetherby may have been singled out by King Henry III and his justiciar Hugh de Burgh as a major threat. So why him? Well, in 1225, Henry III levied enormous amounts of taxes to finance a campaign to France, equivalent to £500 million in today's money. Dr. Crook believes that Wetherby had the audacity to attack those large transports of cash, therefore endangering the king's military objectives. De Burgh ordered the Sheriff of Yorkshire to hunt down Robert Wetherby, and the sheriff likely issued a bounty on his head. And this is what the sheriff got. Literally, a hired bounty hunter killed Robert, decapitated him, and brought back his head to York. The sheriff then strung up in chains the headless body for everyone to see. This punishment was usually reserved for rebel leaders, not ordinary criminals, but Robert's crime had repercussions at the kingdom's broader strategic level, granting him such a VIP treatment. So, we have a bandit called Robert captured and killed by the Sheriff of Yorkshire. What's the connection with the Hood and with Sherwood? Well, first of all, the Sheriff of Yorkshire had previously been the Deputy Sheriff of Nottingham. Then, contemporary records mention the crown reclaiming the riches stolen by another bandit, Robert Hod. Dr. Crook posits that Hod and Wetherby may have been the same person, only recorded under two different names in different accounts. Robert's legendary heist against the crown's tax collectors eventually fired up the imagination of the vexed common folk, giving birth to the legend of Robin. Although it must be pointed out that our favourite fictional Robin stole from the rich to give to the poor, meanwhile our real-life Robin Hood just stole from the rich, full stop. The last king to hunt in Sherwood was Charles I. From 1642 on, the monarch was busy with more pressing matters, the English Civil War against Cromwell's Roundheads. And after 1649, he could no longer visit due to an unforeseen development, his own decapitation. During this time of unrest, the forest in Nottinghamshire suffered from neglect and lack of dedicated management. With the year 1660 came the Restoration. Charles II revived many institutions and traditions that had been wiped out with Cromwell, including the stalking of deer in Sherwood. The new king replenished as best he could the game reserves and restored some of the old management practices. In the following century, the Crown found it more and more profitable to sell large areas of Sherwood rather than reaping income from its resources. These estates were bought by wealthy aristocratic families and became collectively known as the dukeries. In the 19th century, the Crown continued to sell tracts of Sherwood. By 1830, the last remaining areas of Bilhow and Birklands had been sold. Now entering the Victorian period, Sherwood became a major tourist attraction as sightseers were attracted by the revival of medieval folktales centred around Nottinghamshire. Walter Scott's novels, such as Ivanhoe, contributed in great measure. A major pole of attraction was, and still is, the Major Oak, one of many centennial oaks found in Sherwood. The oak is believed to be at least 1,000 years old, and it's estimated to weigh 23 tons. Its trunk measures measures 33 feet in circumference, and it branches out more than 92 feet. The tree received its current name after archaeologist Major Hayman Rooke mentioned it in a book on the ancient trees of Sherwood. But the oldest recorded name for this magnificent Quercus rubor was Cockpen Tree, as it was a meeting place for matches of a very popular sport in Georgian times, cockfighting. The sport had been originally introduced by the Romans and reached the apex of its popularity in the mid-18th century when it was considered an esteemed pastime for any gentleman worthy of his name. Cockpen Tree may have been visited by two of the most obsessed enthusiasts of the sport, Sir Charles Sedley and Colonel Mellish, both hailing from Nottinghamshire. The latter was so addicted to betting on cockfights that he was ultimately financially ruined. The rules of the fight were simple. Contestants would place their gamecocks in the cockpit, and they must battle until one was either dead or critically injured. It was not uncommon for the birds to be fitted with silver spurs to inflict additional damage. A typical event held at Cockpen Tree and other similar cockpits was a Welch Main. This was a tournament starting with at least 16 pairs of contestants. After several elimination rounds, only one would emerge triumphant. Almost 2 centuries later, Major Oak became the nucleus of the current Sherwood Country Park. In between, the forest saw some momentous changes. First, industrialization greatly changed its landscape. The major profit-making industries in the area became coal mining and the use of timber for shipbuilding. Naturally, the landscape was greatly impacted and the wooded areas gradually reduced. Then, during the World Wars, large parts of the area were requisitioned by the War Office to be used as training grounds and ammunition stores. The government also replaced many of the original birch and oak groves with conifer plantations, as pinewood was deemed more suitable to the war effort. With the establishment of the Sherwood Country Park in 1969, the Nottinghamshire County Council was able to preserve, restore and expand what remained of the original forest. By 1978, the park covered a total area of 448 acres, and in 2002 it was designated as a National Nature Reserve due to the presence of more than 1,000 ancient oaks. Our modern system of protections for Sherwood Forest's ecological linchpins and cultural contributions completes a common cycle for a unique locale. Sherwood Forest was once the exclusive hunting ground for kings and later became the back garden to the wealthy elite. No other forest in the world can boast a story arc quite like that. And appropriately, it is a heritage site of international significance with an average of 350,000 annual visitors. As COVID travel restrictions are lifted, those visitors will be able to enjoy a unique experience. Sherwood is set to be the world's first forest to install a 5G network. This will allow it to host augmented reality content for tourists and to coordinate the movement of drones to survey and monitor the health of the forest, the next chapter in a rare book of history, legend, and culture. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Please do check out our friends at Manscaped. And thank you for watching.